Welcome to the Maybe Baby Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Mariah Montgomery. Here we'll discuss all things infertility like heartbreak, joy, growth, loss, and the wild, crazy journey that it is. Let's bring awareness, education, and understanding to the table. You aren't alone. Together, we've got this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Maybe Baby Diaries podcast. Today, I'm super excited to have Meradith on with Somatic Motherhood. Meradith, thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited. I love it.
I'm really happy that you're here and that you were up for all the conversation that we're about to have.
Of course. Of course.
So tell me what your family building process looked like for you in the beginning.
Sure. So, newly married, of course, and then wanting to start a family. And I was able to get pregnant right away with my oldest daughter, who is now 21.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I hate saying it out loud. And everything was fine and had a beautiful pregnancy and birth, and just she was there 9 months later. And, had the baby and was loving life. And then I was like, okay, she was 2. So I was like, oh, I think I want another kiddo. And I couldn't get pregnant for a while. And then I did get pregnant, and then I would miscarry. And about 6 to 9 weeks is when I miscarried my first baby.
Oh.
And then got pregnant right away again. And again, this one was at 12 weeks. And so I was a little bit further along. And then got pregnant again and miscarried again at 9 weeks. So I had 3 miscarriages back to back. And because I had a healthy, at this point, 3-year-old, because that process was a year long, right?
Yeah.
The doctors were like, well, we don't know. And I would ask questions, and then they would talk me out of like genetic testing or like to see what was going on, because I had a healthy baby. So obviously you can get pregnant, but you just can't keep a pregnancy right now. And so that was the year-long process of those miscarriages. And then I got pregnant with my second kiddo, and the pregnancy stuck. I took, oh my goodness, unholy amounts of progesterone, right, to keep the pregnancy. I was throwing up for 21 weeks.
Oh.
That second trimester hit, and it was like magic. I finally felt like a normal human. Grocery stores, I could not go into grocery stores and could not eat food I prepared. The whole story with like that, the progesterone just being so high. And then when that placenta starts taking over, making the progesterone for the baby, it was just a magic moment. And so then I had my second daughter. And again, like she was healthy and fine and all the things. And I actually got pregnant right away with my third baby. And so doctors just were like, oh, then it's fine. It's over. Right. And so I was like, okay, sure.
You're like, what was that then?
What was that? And, but after my third kiddo, I started experiencing miscarriages again. And and I actually, so it was about 3 years after after I had my third kiddo that I wanted to have another baby. And so I thought, well, I had 2 kiddos back to back. This should be fine. And nope, it wasn't. And so I had a miscarriage. Actually, I had my son, who was actually stillborn, and he was born at 20 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
And so, and again, it was like, well, you have 3 healthy kiddos. This must just have been a fluke or, whatever. There was no, should we look into this? Or
that blows my mind.
I know
that they weren't. I mean, after like the second miscarriage, I feel like that's usually when they start, questioning and saying, okay, what can we do on our end to help you keep this baby to term.
Right. The only thing that was ever offered to me was progesterone.
That's it?
Which is super helpful and super beneficial if you have hormonal imbalances, which I do.
Yeah.
Come to find out now, it was possibly misdiagnosed thyroid disease, right? Because the thyroid is so important to have working for pregnancy and metabolism and things like that, and the metabolization of your hormones and how they work and everything like that. Like I am currently still on progesterone because I have low progesterone. And so, but that was the only thing that was ever suggested to me. And it was actually not even by my OBGYN. It was by a health food. Like,
oh my goodness.
Like I went into the health food store and I was like, I just keep miscarrying and I really need help. I need help. And how do I balance my body? And she handed me a progesterone cream, and that's what saved my second daughter's pregnancy. And that's why I was so sick, because I was using so much.
Yeah. And
so, when my son was born, they just evaluated his body because he was actually born in one piece, which is unusual for a stillborn at that stage.
Yeah.
And I only say that he passed away at 17 weeks, so I wasn't able to go through the birth process for 3 weeks due to life circumstances and just stress, and my body just would not go into labor naturally with him, which is common, especially with when he passed away, and my body just didn't have the hormones to kick in.
Right.
And so, I was a doula at that point.
So for those that are listening, can you tell us kind of briefly like what a doula is?
So of course.
For those people that don't know.
Yes. So a doula helps moms go through labor and delivery and through that process, and assist with the pain and positions that are beneficial for labor and birth. We just don't catch babies. That's the doctor or the midwife's job. And I've been a doula for 14 years, maybe 15.
14 or 15.
Right. That mathing is hard right now.
It's okay.
So, and, I teach women the safety of inductions and what medications are beneficial if you want an induction, which ones you should stay away from.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was having my son, who was stillborn, I had to use a medication that I train and like educate women not to use. And my body just was like, rejected it because I was like, this could be dangerous. Right. But I learned something very valuable through that whole experience, that in the case of what I was going through, that medication is what you should use. And as soon as because I tried to go into labor like so many times for hours with him, and my body just was like, no, like, first of all, the grief, like we don't talk enough about like the grief and of the loss, and how your body sometimes your body wants to hold on because it's your baby.
Yeah.
It's the love, the love of your life at that moment. And, and I'll get emotional because it was such a beautiful experience. And at the time, of course, I didn't see it that way, but I'm on the other side, right?
And I can see the beauty through the trial.
Yes, and I can see the beauty and the magic and just everything that baby gave me. And his name is David. I encourage everyone to use their baby's name, no matter what gestation of your loss, because I do bereavement work, which is the loss of pregnancy and miscarriage and stillbirth. And David just gave me so much, and he's going to be forever a part of me. And And everybody, you know, who has experienced loss, it's with you forever. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, when I was finally able to come to terms, right, that this is real, this is happening, I finally was able to use, the medication finally worked. And I had to go through labor, and I had to go through, you know, birthing David and birthing the placenta and like the whole thing. And sitting there with that, going through all of that and going, and I don't get to bring a baby home. Working through that with people that understood and knew, it was such a beautiful process, because now I can sit with a woman and go, I know. And it's rough, because I don't want to say it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you're going to hear, when you experience loss like that, you know, you get comments all the time of like, well, at least you have kids at home.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're in a better place. You know, these dumb comments, and people mean well, right? Like, I used to get so angry. Like, don't tell me that, you know? And most of the time it's your family.
I know.
Which is so strange. They just don't know how to, like,
I think they want to help, but they don't know how.
Right. Yeah. They don't know how, and they want you to be okay, right? And the biggest thing I've learned through my own process of, you know, loss and building my family and things like that is like, just let people not be okay.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And if you
yes.
Right? And if you can't sit and be uncomfortable with someone, don't. Right? Yeah. Because I think as a society and as a culture, especially with women and how we've been, you know, programmed, right, to just be happy and look like it's okay and pretend. I think it's such a refreshing thing to be like, yeah, you don't have to be okay.
Yeah.
Be the mess.
And own that.
And just own it.
Yeah.
And I hope we're changing that, right?
I hope so.
I hope so. Right?
I really, really do.
Yeah. And through my experience with David, I learned to be uncomfortable. And because I had such an amazing midwife at the time who was also okay with being uncomfortable, it was magic. And that's what David gave me, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And that's not even my last miscarriage. I had one more after him, and then I was able to have 2 more children. And so I've had a total of 4 miscarriages, 1 stillborn, and then 5 children. And each one has given me so much. So, yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel like was the hardest part of being in the middle of recurrent pregnancy loss, especially when you didn't have an answer as to why it was happening? It just kept happening.
Yeah. Yeah. The hardest part was just, well, miscarriage is a form of infertility, right? So, recurrent miscarriage, which is what I was having and experiencing. And the biggest thing was, well, you have a healthy baby, so you should be fine. And literally just feeling so broken, because obviously I wasn't fine. Obviously my body was rejecting pregnancy, like that's what it felt like, right? Like,
yes.
Oh, well, like, and they kept saying, well, you know, if there's anything wrong with the baby, then your body will just your body's so smart. It'll just, which
is not comforting.
No, because I'm like, oh my God, well then what's wrong with the baby?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like when David was born, they just did a physical, like a visual check. He fit in the palm of my hand.
Oh, tiny baby.
Yeah, tiny baby. And it's so funny because he had no fat, right? Because he hadn't reached that stage of development.
Just a little 17-weeker.
Yeah. And he had all of his bones and all of his toes and all of his little nose. And, but he just had no fat on him. So he's just this cute little lanky,
tiny little baby.
Yeah, tiny baby. And because I carried him for 3 weeks after he had passed, the only visual thing that was like wrong per se is he had a blood clot in his brain. But because he was 3 weeks postmortem, that's a normal occurrence, right? So they just pass that off as like, well, that's normal, And I'm like, but this isn't normal, right? Like I carried him to 17 weeks.
Like you shouldn't be losing your baby.
Right.
You shouldn't have lost all your babies.
No.
Like that. Yeah.
And for them, like it was just brushed off. Like it shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal, right? And so even with family and friends, right? It was like, well, at least you have your baby. And then when I had 3, it was like, well, you have 3 kids. Aren't you fine? Aren't you done? Shouldn't you be done? I mean, with that many miscarriages, Meredith, are you just being selfish, right? Like, are you just being like, why do you need more? You have 3, right? Well, and one of the driving forces was like, can my body do this? Right? Like, can I do this? Is this, but I was never checked for PCOS, which is a polycystic ovarian syndrome, which can cause recurring miscarriages. A medication I had been using could, but this is all post research on my own.
Yeah.
Like this is all me. There was no doctor that was like helping. And even I had to have a DNC with one of my miscarriages. And the doctor, like, because I have to back up. Sorry.
You're fine.
Okay.
You're okay.
My first miscarriage, I had a midwife that was not proactive about doing an ultrasound to making sure, because I passed everything on my own. Which is, you can't, right? You, as long as they check and make sure that your cervix is closing, your HCG levels, which is that pregnancy hormone, is coming down, and the bleeding should stop within, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on your gestational period. And she was not proactive. She did not do an ultrasound to make sure that there was no retention of tissue, which can happen in miscarriages. And I had I'm pretty sure the placenta had retained.
Oh, no.
And I was calling every week because the bleeding would not slow down or stop. She said, I should be fine. You should be fine. And you're fine. And I bled for 8 weeks, like profusely.
Okay, and how far along were you when you
This was a 6 to 8 week loss.
That is a really long time
for bleeding.
Loss.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It should not have been like that. And again, I was calling and she's like, I don't know what's going on. You should be fine. Let me know. Well, and I was using tampons, which you should not be using.
Mm-mm.
And I went in and finally, again, someone at a health food store helped me out because the doctors were like, well, you should be okay, And so because I had a uterine infection with that first loss.
Oh my goodness.
And so my next loss, I did not want any part of that. I did not want to bleed. I was like, just do the DNC, and And that's where they go in and scrape everything, and clean your uterus out.
Yeah.
And the third miscarriage, I had a doctor, my doctor was not there, and the on-call doctor didn't know my history and told me to wait through the weekend. And so
we've had some family members that have had that happen too, and I just don't understand.
Right?
Oh man.
I know. And yeah, it was just to have recurring loss like that and, not have the availability of your own doctor is really frustrating because the on-call doctor, of course, doesn't know your history, doesn't know what you've gone through, doesn't know what you've suffered with. And, it's really frustrating. And then women are not heard, right? We're just not heard. And we should be just fine. And it's just a miscarriage. That was the other one that I would hear a lot. Oh, it's just a miscarriage.
Oh my goodness.
It wasn't a baby. That was the other one. It wasn't even a baby. I'm like, do you know development? And I mean, of course, everybody's belief systems are different, but for me, that was extremely dismissive.
And that was your baby.
And that was my baby, and I work with women that I'm encouraging them to acknowledge that it is a baby and name your baby and have something in your home that represents your baby. Because like I said earlier, they never go away. Your memory of them, every pregnancy is very different with each one of my children. I knew their personalities, and David, my son, I knew him, he and I were like inseparable, right? And just like every other one of my children that I have, inseparable. And in his birth and his pregnancy story is just amazing because I felt when I got pregnant with him. And it was really cool. I was camping and all of a sudden I was setting up a tent of all things and I stood up straight and I was like, I'm pregnant. And I never took a pregnancy test. Not once with him. I just knew. Yeah.
What a really cool gift that you were given to be able to experience that with that sweet baby.
Yeah. He was intense for sure. But yeah. Yeah. So the hardest part was just being dismissed, I think, over and over and over again. And then like asking questions and then like, should I take genetic testing? Should I see what is happening? And then like they would give the suggestion and then talk me out of it because it was like, well, we could, but you have healthy children. You have your body can have a baby, right? And so it was like, well, yeah, here's some options, but
man, it's crazy how much you had to be your own advocate throughout your process because you should be able to have children, but you weren't.
Right.
And this shouldn't be happening, but it was. And yes, you did at the time have one beautiful, perfect, healthy baby, but you're not anymore. And it's like, I am so sorry that you were so dismissed. That is so hard.
Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, it's just a weird place to be, like where, at the time, nobody was really acknowledging that miscarriage is a recurrent, especially recurring is a form of infertility that you need to like, nobody was talking about it. And everybody was just like, well, we'll see,
Or not acknowledging that they were having them or just, it was very like, hush, hush. Yeah.
Yeah. Hush, hush. And it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
And it is a huge deal.
Well, especially if you want, children.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially if you, want to build a family and things like that. And like I said, I was just throwing progesterone, and it wasn't even by a doctor. That's crazy.
Yeah. So what do you feel like throughout this whole, I mean, you had like the whole year-long process of trying and trying and trying for a baby. And then you lost your sweet baby when he was 17 weeks. And then you had another miscarriage. That's a lot. That is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of heartache on one person. What do you feel like kept you going? What do you feel like gave you hope throughout the whole experience? Because like,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I am a very resilient person and I'm very resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank God every day that I have that within me because I know there's a lot of people that don't. And that's one of the reasons why I became, infertility and bereavement doula work. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I started it. Because even though I could walk alone,
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I love that part where that's saying, and I'll probably massacre it, but
You're okay.
it's like, I'm strong, not because I wanted to be, but I had to be. And just because I am doesn't mean that I don't need or want support. Right. And no woman, especially in pregnancy and birth, should ever be alone. Like that's our most vulnerable, open time
Yeah.
to everything around us, right? All of the energy that we encounter, all of the people, all of the things people say, all of the things people do, it hits really hard and it affects us and it affects our babies, right? And so thinking of me being that with the isolation and the dismissiveness and it's not a big deal and why are you so upset? I hid, like, okay, fine. And it makes us as women hard and where and we don't reach out for help,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I decided that no, that's not okay. And I just became my crusade of like, you're not okay. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do it alone. And you don't need to, worry that I'm going to judge you about you crying when you miscarried, even if it was 4 weeks, right? No matter what stage we feel a connection. And especially if it's a wanted baby,
Yeah.
right? And I started my bereavement work even before my training in Arizona, where I was living, and I trained as a doula. When I ran support circles for pregnancy,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, loss is part of pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I had one of the women that came regularly experience a loss, and we all, came together and we honored her pregnancy. We honored her baby. I still remember the baby's name. And that was my first full experience in helping someone go through that loss. And it just changed me, especially when we break down those walls of what society tells us we should do, right?
Yeah.
Just get back and go.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you still go through postpartum. That's another thing. You still go through postpartum when you have a loss. Your hormones have to come back in balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I am also a survivor of postpartum mental illness. And to go through postpartum where you don't even have a cute little baby to hug and love is rough.
Hey, girl.
Yeah.
So you've mentioned like your bereavement doula work and kind of like your birth doula work. Tell me about your infertility doula work. I am really excited to talk about this.
Yeah. So I do a lot of the loss and fertility work. That's where a lot of, because it's so untouched.
Yes.
But I've worked with several women who are experiencing infertility where they can't get pregnant for variety of reasons. And it's really a hard process because it is grief as well. You're grieving your ability or your body's ability and feeling all of those feelings of like the same thing. What's wrong with my body?
Mm-hmm.
It must be broken. I'm broken, you know? And of course, with infertility and trying to get pregnant with in vitro, oh my gosh, you know, the stress of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm talking, preaching to the choir, you're starting your journey, right?
Yeah.
And the shots and, you know, the cycles.
Oh, girl, before you leave today, I will have to show you in my fridge all of my shots that are just ready for us to start.
Yep. And the timing. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Like,
Yeah.
I have to get this right.
Your life isn't your own
No,
when you're going through it.
no,
Yeah.
not at all. Not at all. And like, oh, I hope I do this right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the feeling of failing and the crushing, like, heaviness of like, this all depends on if I do this right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that needs support and that needs acknowledgement and that needs care and that needs love because, whew, you know, like it's a whole other level of work
Yeah.
and it's a job. And you're like, and I didn't want this job.
Nope.
Right? Like, how did I get here? You know? And then feeling all of those feelings and being like, you're going to get mad. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel sadness, deep, deep sadness. And walking with someone that's going through all of those emotions, you better be okay with being uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you mess up, right? Like I've said stupid things because we're human,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being okay with being wrong. And I think that's a real big part of it and going, you know what? Oops, I'm sorry. And because I've experienced infertility in a very different way, right? And I never, ever say, I know what you're going through. Because everybody's journey and everybody's way of feeling is so different.
Yeah.
And being like, I totally don't know what you're going through, but I'm here with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here, right? Like instead of like, I love Brene Brown's little skit about grief, right?
Yes.
Like,
Oh my
do you
gosh,
want a
so good.
sandwich? Right? No, get in the hole, you know, get in the hole with them and go, yeah, I've been in a hole before, my own hole, right? And it's okay. I'm going to sit with you and then we'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
Right. And basically with, I've worked with a couple of women that were going through the infertility process with using IVF. And it was just, I just need like support. I just need you to know that this is hard.
Yeah.
And also like understanding that, you know, like the possibility of multiple babies, you know, which is super exciting, but that's also another level of like acceptance of like, this could be what I do. This could happen. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, and also the guilt with like, oh my gosh, what if postpartum hits afterwards and I don't want to hold my baby? How dare I feel that way when I had to do all of these things to get this baby here?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, sweetie, yeah, like you might feel that. And I'm not going to judge you because no matter how we get a baby here, it doesn't negate the fact that our hormones are going to do what they're going to do.
Yes, they are.
Right. And we're going to feel certain things that don't make sense and that we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all very common.
I love that. I love that. So because you do a lot of doula work, what would you recommend For somebody maybe that's listening that maybe knows somebody that's going through recurrent pregnancy loss or somebody that is going for
you, or, try to keep judgmental comments or your belief systems, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's belief systems are a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just be okay with sitting with someone, right?
Yeah.
Like, let them cry. Let them cry. Tell them it's okay that it's not okay, right? And just be.
I love that. Oh my goodness, I love that. What would you recommend for somebody that is going through recurrent pregnancy loss and infertility? What would you, as a doula, as somebody who's been there and understands, like, what would you recommend for them to be able to just cope? At the very least, just to be able to cope.
Let people help.
I love that. It's so simple, but yeah.
Let people help. And also, like, reach out to the people that will actually support you, not to people who are not going to support you.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is most of the time it's family that is the least supportive, sometimes. So reach out to the people that will get it, that are going to be like, I'm here. I'm right. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do whatever you want, what you need. And also make a plan if you can. And if you can't make a plan, like, what I mean by that is, like, especially with recurrent pregnancy loss or things like that, you need to rest. You need to heal. You've gone through the birth process without birthing, right? And so don't vacuum. Have somebody come and help you with that. Try to rest, and then eat healthy.
Yeah.
The same things you would do at with a full term pregnancy is kind of your postpartum time with loss. You need to do that.
Just take care of yourself.
Just take care of yourself. And then with the infertility, of course, the grieving process is real, and it's going to happen. Just like with recurring miscarriage, that grieving process, allow yourself to grieve. My favorite person about grief and death is Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He runs the Center for Grieving and Loss in Colorado. I took a class from him. He is absolutely amazing about acknowledging not just their life, but also their death, and the real healing that happens when we acknowledge death in our society, right? And he changed my life about that. I was terrified of death, and I took his class, and it just changed my whole perspective on how, as a society, we're kind of like trying to brush it under the rug when we really should pull it out and look at it and acknowledge it and be being willing to talk about it. So talking about it is really huge for those that are experiencing recurring loss, and also who are experiencing infertility, because we've got to talk about it. We've got to make it an okay thing to talk about, because it's real and it happens and it's part of our reality, especially for those that are experiencing it.
Yeah.
If we feel like we have to hide it, it just breeds that shame and that what's wrong with me.
And sometimes there's nothing wrong with you.
Sometimes there's nothing wrong with you.
I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, it just happens. And that doesn't even mean that you're broken and that you're not worthy of that baby.
Or worthy to have another baby.
Yes. Yes, I understand that one.
Yes. Even though, well, you have 2 kids or you have 4 kids, whatever, it doesn't matter. It matters to the person who wants to build their family.
Yes.
And that's okay.
And loss is still loss. And grief is still grief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all valid.
And it's all valid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's okay that you want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, we're not here to make everybody comfortable.
Exactly. But there's this beauty that happens when you do let yourself be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And when you really let yourself sit with people that are in that grief, you can find just life changes a little bit when you allow yourself to get vulnerable with somebody else.
Absolutely.
Whether that be you sharing your journey or whether that be sitting with somebody in that intense, heavy grief,
Mm-hmm.
One of our goals of this podcast was seriously to talk about all of the aspects of infertility. And I think sometimes we forget that infertility isn't just a couple trying to get pregnant for a year and they can't get pregnant and then they have an infertility diagnosis. There's so many other ways. And just because your journey is different, it doesn't mean that you still aren't worthy of that support and that love.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love what you've said about sharing your journey because I feel like there is so much strength when we share and when we are willing to get vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I've loved everything that you've said so far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's, like I said, it's just really important that we just start acknowledging it, start talking about it.
Yeah.
And one of the books that I read about loss is Birth, Breath, and Death.
That's a heavy title.
I know.
Oh.
It's a wonderful book, and the training is wonderful too. So, yeah. One of the things about infertility and the process of getting pregnant, the stress, right?
Yeah.
We need to just we need to really, stress is so hard on the body, right? And then you're going through this really hard process. And so one of the things that I really want to encourage those that are going through the infertility process is do whatever it takes, right, to keep the stress low, especially the stress that we're putting on ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because giving yourself shots, making sure the timing is right, and, checking and all the process that you had to get to the point of just getting the shots is rough.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We've already had a year behind us, or 3 years, or 5 years, or whatever time it took you to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So much stress. And a woman in that state, it's already hard on your body. So surround yourself with people who love you. Surround yourself with, things that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And get connected to the body, right? And do your best to rest, because that's where magic happens, in the rest phase of life, right? That's rest and digest. That's where things happen.
Yeah.
And that's where healing takes place. And that's where the magic, right? And that's really hard to achieve when we're going through such a stressful process on the body, because you're putting your body into a state where pregnancy can happen that isn't the way that it is normally.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that, getting all of that oxytocin, get it flowing, buy yourself flowers,
Yeah.
eat the chocolate, and a lot of the time the weight gain is really hard for a woman because, man, you're going to gain some weight usually with infertility drugs and all of that. And that's really hard. Be gentle. It's going to be okay. And just surround yourself with what you love and the people that love you, and only reach out to those that really are going to be okay, and not offer, junk advice, which is hard for people.
I know. They mean well.
They mean well. Oh gosh. I can't tell you how many times I'm biting my tongue when somebody opens their mouth and I'm like, did you think that through? You probably didn't.
Was there a thought process happening there?
Not at all.
Oh
Please don't say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had, yeah. And it's hard because I have training, right? With things to say,
Yeah.
things not to say, right? And then I have to remind myself that not everybody has that. And just, aw.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
Said with so much love, though.
Said with so much love. Yeah.
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 Meredith, where can people connect with you? Where can people find you? I feel like you just offer so much beauty to the world, and I am sure that there's somebody I'm just sure that there's somebody out there who's going to need you. Where can people find you?
So my website is somaticmotherhood.com. It has all of my information. I'm also on Facebook, Meradith Fraser, and Somatic Motherhood on Facebook. And yeah, word of mouth, you know. I am one of the few that I'm always on call.
Yes.
Especially because I'm working with women who are in just, you know, not great spaces.
Yeah.
And my phone is always on. So
awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today.
You're welcome.
I think this has been great, and I am really looking forward to getting this out and having people hear this conversation. I think it's an important one.
I think so too.
Yeah. Thank you so much, though, for everything that you've shared. You've been phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I loved it.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in and listening to all of Meredith's amazing, just everything about her is so amazing. I just adore her.
Now I'm blushing.
We'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.